director. I'm the academic director of the Integrated Marketing and Communications Department here at the Division of Programs in Business at the School of Professional Studies. It's an absolute pleasure to see so many of you join this call. I want to thank George particularly for his ingenuity and resourcefulness and constant dedication to our students. And I want to thank Ria and her colleagues at the IMA for helping us promote, and most especially to welcome Karthik. I think we're all fascinated to hear about the journey you've been on and the work of P&G. So without further ado, I'll hand that back to George.
Well, great. Thank you so much, Michael, for joining us. And for those of you who I see are joining online, my name, once again, is George Benaroya. Now, during the day, I work as a CFO. My first job was at Procter & Gamble, and then Tetra Pak, Beiersdorf, and now in private equity. Now, I remember that at P&G on my first year, I learned many things that I didn't learn doing an MBA. And so what I do once per week is something that I really love, and that is to teach this finance class here at NYU. Now, the way we do it to be different in the sense that we try to have the students first on session number 1 pick a company, any company, and they have chosen Procter & Gamble. And then we learn about finance, but looking at the financial decisions that companies make in real life. Let me show you how it works. And it'll be great if some of you can tell me if you can see my screen.
Yes.
Great, excellent. So imagine that we're on session 2 and we look at headcount. So we say, okay, how many people are we going to hire next year for the entire marketing department on a global basis? And that number is 110, and this is one of our students. Now then we look at things like, okay, in Europe, severance is regulated by law. In the US, it's not. What can we learn from other countries? For example, my second boss at Procter & Gamble taught me something which was quite interesting, and that is that is good for business to treat people right. The next session, on session 3, we look at price changes, and we say, okay, if we delay a price increase or decrease from January to March, what is the overall effect for the total year? We then look at, for example, something skincare cream, and we say, okay, this sells for $20, but in New York, salaries are 56% higher than in El Paso, Texas. So should we have a local, national, or global price list? And in general, what we do is we have students share their opinions, right? So in all these global companies, we say, well, maybe we should do it like this, or we should do it like that. And we foster that in class to have different views for the P&L in 2019, 2020, and the previous year, and so on. And the other thing that we do is to invite 2 senior executives to share with us how they make these decisions in real life. And tonight, I'm delighted that we have the regional CFO at Procter & Gamble, Karthik Natarajan, who has also led business transformation in 6 countries where he has both lived and worked. That is in the US, China, Dubai, India, the Philippines, and Singapore. Now, P&G is the largest advertiser in the world. Their sales are $70 billion, over $70 billion. And they have billion-dollar brands like Gillette, Always, Pampers, Tide, Head & Shoulders, and Crest. I was just telling Federico at P&G that when I started, we didn't have emails. And I will be doing these spreadsheets, in Excel, and go one by one with all these brands and so on. The world has changed a lot since then. Now, over 2,000 employees from 40 nationalities work at the regional headquarters in Singapore. And as CFO, Procter & Gamble Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa, Mr. Natarajan manages a team of over 1,000 professionals. He's also regularly representing Procter & Gamble in media and other public engagements to share P&G's vision and mission, and, as they say, grow our business, our people, and our service to the community. Now, look, we've been communicating with Patrick late at night. He's extremely busy. He has a meeting that he has to run to and so on. And so for those of you who are unmuted, I would like to ask you to join me in a warm round of applause. And on behalf of all the students, Patrick, thank you very, very much for joining our class. Over to you, Patrick.
Josh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Yeah.
And can you see my slides?
Not yet.
All right, just 1 second.
Okay, look.
They can hear me, they just need to see the slides. They can hear me, that's not an issue.
They can hear you?
Yeah.
We can hear you perfectly well. It's great now. And if you just press the share screen at the bottom, then we'll be able to see your screen as well.
Yep, just give a second, George.
Yep. Perfect.
Can you see it now?
Yep.
All right. A very good evening to everyone. I hope you're staying safe. I hope your families are staying safe. I want to thank George for this wonderful opportunity. Nothing better than starting my day by interacting with young minds. And I also want to thank Michael for the warm welcome. The topic today is very close to my heart. So I'll start by saying a good strategic framework is one that helps businesses win and thrive everywhere, right? Before I actually get into the topic, let me just briefly introduce myself. I've spent over 20 years with P&G. I currently serve P&G, the shareholders and the consumers in the Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa region. I'm the region CFO here. In my 20 plus years, as George said, I've lived in 6 countries. I'll tell you a small story. The first time I actually took a flight in my adult life was actually when I moved from one city in India to another city to join P&G. 20 years back, flights were still expensive in India, and most middle-income families could not afford it, and neither could we. Thanks to P&G, I've now been to over 35 countries, spread across 6 out of the 7 continents. We still don't have a business in Antarctica. We'll eventually get there. But everywhere else, I've had the opportunity, thanks to this company, to visit, learn, and meet consumers. Importantly, my family has had the privilege of living in 6 countries. So let me briefly introduce them to you. Sandhya and I have been married for over 15 years. I've been blessed with a wonderful wife who likes the adventure of moving to different places. And we have 2 lovely children. Gohan is 8 and Ananya turns 5 in a week from now, right? So that's family. Let me start with a brief story about Gohan, actually. It sort of explains why I've been with P&G for over 20 years, because that's a question I get very often. When Gohan was born, and Gohan was our first child, Sandhya and I were in Cincinnati. I was doing a business planning role, and suffice to say that it was an important role to be done with long hours, because there are a lot of things that change when you're working on business plans for a $70 billion company. Sandhya developed some complications in the pregnancy, so we had to rush her to the hospital. And when we reached the hospital, the doctor said, "You're not going to leave this hospital without delivering the baby," and it was going to be a preterm baby. My vice president called and said, "Take all the time you need. Make sure that Sandhya's there make sure you're there for Sandhya, and make sure you come back only when you feel like you're ready." Okay. Not just that. After the baby was delivered, Gohan was preterm. So we needed to make sure that he spent quality time in the neonatal facility. He's fine now. He's a healthy 8-year-old. But at that point, obviously, we didn't know that. So we were stressed as a young couple with our first baby. The P&G spouses did such a wonderful job. Even after I had to go back to work, they would actually make a schedule to take Sandhya to the neonatal facility every day. And then I would drive back after work to pick them up. That's what makes P&G so special. P&G and its people have been there for me every time I went through anything tough, be it at personal or in my professional journey. And that's why I've been with this company for 20 plus years. And the fact that even after these many years, I still feel like I'm learning every day on the job. And that's testimony to the quality of the people this company has. With that, let me start by sharing one of my favorite quotes about strategy. Right? Strategy is not a eureka moment. When I was young, I used to think I'd come up with some brilliant strategies by doing some insightful work, and one day I would get up and think I've figured it out. It doesn't quite work that way. Strategy is a journey. It needs to be part of the DNA, be it the thinking process or the activity of a company to be successful. Hence, it is important that we continue to evolve it and work every day to make sure that we are able to operationalize it. What you'll hear me speak today is a brief introduction of who we are as a company as Procter & Gamble. Then I have the pleasure and privilege of introducing my region to you, which is Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa. And then we get to the core of the discussion, which is strategies to win in Asia and everywhere. I do want to make this very interactive. George has been kind enough to collect questions. I want to address them as we go along. And I want to have quality time towards the end for Q&A. To the extent that I'll get to as many questions as possible, I want to make sure that we have the full hour. I apologize, we started a little late for all the technical glitches that sometimes happen, but I'll make sure that we spend the full hour. And if there are additional questions, George, if you could send them to me by email, I'll be happy to address them by email as well. And then you can share it to the students.
Great, excellent. How would you like to go about it, for your slides? Would you like me to raise my hand when there is a question about that slide? Or
absolutely. Feel free to interrupt me as many times as possible. The more interactive it is, the better it is.
Great, excellent. Thanks.
All right, this is who we are. We, Procter & Gamble, are a company of brands. Our brands serve a purpose. In today's environment, where consumers' concern on health and hygiene are heightened, our brands play an even more important role, and we take this responsibility very seriously. From laundry detergents, to tissue paper, to feminine hygiene products, to baby diapers, to shampoos, we want to make sure that these products are available to consumers at this point in time when it's especially important for them and their families. And while we are very proud of our brands, we are a company that also put people first. Instead of me trying to articulate it, I want to take a quote from one of our former CEOs, Richard Dupree, which is relevant today as it was when he made it 30, 40 years back. Let me read it to you because it's one of my favorite quotes. What he said was, if you leave us our money, our buildings, and our brands, but take away our people, the company will fail. But if you take away our money, our buildings, and our brands, but leave us our people, we can rebuild the whole thing in a decade. Right? This encapsulates everything that we believe in. Our company was founded in 1837, and the reason. Go ahead, George.
Patrick, sorry, but just to go back, we have one question that many of us have as an issue, right? And the question is, could you go back to the previous slide so that you can see the question from the student, why he's asking that? He's saying, look, P&G unit volume grew 3% in 2019, right? But how does P&G calculate unit growth when combining sales of Gillette razor blades with Always feminine pads?
Great question. Excellent question to start with. So here's what it is. It is important for us to be able to represent both externally and internally a way in which we can sum up these products so that we know whether we are making progress. The way we do it is we convert, I beg your pardon, the cases that we produce into comparable volume. And the way we do it is based on efficacy of the product as well as usage habit of the consumers. So this is called statistical units. So for instance, 100-part detergents equals 1 statistical unit. We similarly have statistical units for every single product that we sell, be it H&S, which is Head & Shoulders, be it Tide Pods, be it Fairy cleaning products, be it Whisper. So what it does is this is an effort that actually we take quite seriously because it's worked very intensely with the technical community, with our R&D partners and colleagues. And this allows us to make sure that we can equalize volume in terms of statistical units. It is very important because when we think about the progress that we are making, it offers us a comparative basis. It is equally important when we report our results so that our stakeholders can see the kind of volume progress and the unit progress that we are making. Did I address your question, George?
Yes, and that was excellent. Thanks very much for that.
Thank you, George. Okay, this is who we are and what we believe in. You can read our values, but as I said, this is who we are as a company, and this is the reason why we have survived for 175 years, thrived, and winning in the market. Our consumers trust us, and I have, in my 20 years, never gone home and struggled to sleep, because every single day, I know I get paid to make the right decision. Even if it's a difficult decision, the right decision. I'll give you an example of this. When I was in China, we launched the Crest White Strips product. It so happened that we had a claim in the US at that point in time, which we had for 28 days. You can use it and you'll find whiteness. Our test results showed that in China, we'd get the same level of whiteness in 14 days. And that's because consumer habits are different in every market. And as a result, based on our quantitative research, we went to the 14-day claim, fully endorsed by the health authorities in China. And we had stickered it on the US product. It so happened that some of the stickers started coming out just because of the transportation, and consumers were confused whether it was 28 days or 14 days. We had every reason to leave it where it is, but we said if consumers have any amount of doubt in our product, we needed to go back and clarify. So we actually took back all the products. That was a decision that I made with my marketing director. It cost us a few $1 million, but it's important we did that, not because we couldn't support it, but it was important that consumers could perceive and build trust in our products. And I didn't lose any sleep in it. And in fact, that's what the company pays us to do, to make sure that we never lose that consumers never lose the trust they have in this company. With that, let me go back and introduce the region that I come from. I'm very proud of this region. It's an exciting region. It's a dynamic region. And George talked about late nights. It's part of the time zone that we work in. You can see I've highlighted in the map. When I'm up in the morning, it doesn't matter what time it is. Japan is normally already up because they go ahead of Singapore. It doesn't matter when I go to sleep, some part of this region is awake, which is exciting. And it goes from time zones across, you can see it. It takes an entire day to travel across the region. It doesn't matter what flight that you take. And the consumer habits are extremely diverse. It works from the affluent consumers in Australia and Japan to fastest growing economies such as the Philippines, the ASEAN countries, to India, to our Middle Eastern consumers in Saudi, Gulf, Egypt, and the like, and to the beautiful continent of Africa, which is well underrepresented in any atlas, I promise you. If you ever take a flight anywhere in Africa, you will not get within 6 to 8 hours is the minimum that will take you. And that's the diversity of that continent. And it's a beautiful continent if you've not been there yet. So that's the consumers we get to serve. It's over 105 countries. So it's more than half the world's countries. It's over half the world's population. We have 2 technical centers dedicated to service our consumers in this region. And we've been in this region since 1935. Okay. With that, let me move on and give you a flavor of our strategy. The most important thing that I want you to leave with strategy, other than the fact that it's an evolution and it's a growth strategy and it's not episodic, is the fact that strategy really at the end of the day is an integrated set of choices. It doesn't work in isolation. The integrated set of choices that define P&G's strategy is what I have tried to articulate in this slide. And George, feel free to stop me as many times as you wish if there are questions along the way. And that's not an interruption at all.
Okay. There are some coming over, but what's best for you? Would you like me to ask the questions as they are coming, or?
Absolutely. Please feel free to ask them as they come along.
I tell you what, the 2 questions just came up. Would you mind going back to the slide on Asia Pacific, which was, there we go. So the first one is from Jenny Gelfman, who is offline, and she asks, do you specifically develop new products or marketing strategies for Asia Pacific?
Absolutely. At the end of the day, the consumers we serve are fairly diverse, and the environments they operate are also fairly diverse, even if the needs are similar. Let me give you an example of laundry detergents or hair care. The water conditions in market, even within Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa, are diverse. The humidity conditions are different. So unless we design our product based on those factors, it simply will not work, right? Same with perfumes. So let me give you two polarizing examples. In Japan, you generally do not want to increase the scent levels because it's very understated. If you've had Japanese food, you know what I'm talking about. The flavors are meant to be inherent in nature, right? If you want to sell to my Filipino consumers, it has to be a perfume that's distinct and stands out. So a product in Japan will not work in Philippines and vice versa. Similarly, if you take a communication, it's not just about the product. If it has to be in Africa and Nigeria, it has to have the extra zinc. It has to have some music to be correlated. Otherwise, they find it to be very bland, right? Those are important nuances because we are here to serve consumers in the markets. There is no one product that is going to fit for all of them. And let me give you an example, which is even more concrete, of our Guard razor in India. So P&G entered India, and we were offering blades and razors, some of the best products that we had. But we had then in our R&D team fly over and spend over a month in India to understand how the Indian male really shaved. Most of them in tier 2, tier 3 cities in India did not have running water, don't have reliable electricity. So they had to shave with one hand with water, a bucket or a small tub to hold the water, and the other hand with the razor. And when you use a double-edged razor, if you've ever used it, it's very easy to get nicks and cuts, right? Because it's just steel hitting your skin without any protection, right? And that's what these consumers were afraid of. So what we did was we designed a product which is a single-bladed razor with a comfort strip that met the need for this consumer, and we launched it in India. It was the first market we launched, and it was a lead market. It was designed for India. Today, we have 100 million users in India using the Guard razor, right? So that's our responsibility to be able to design appropriately. Of course, we need sometimes sufficient scale to be able to do it. But for us to be able to win, we need to make sure that we're addressing the needs of the consumers in that particular market. Did I address your question, George?
Yeah. And the second question is more maybe as a CFO, right? And this question is from Professor Mark Somolet, also a former Colgate Palmolive executive. And he says, how do you prioritize marketing investments across categories and markets?
Let me offer you two inputs that I'm going to sidestep a little bit, and then I'll come right back into the question. The first thing I would say is at times we tend to prioritize when prioritization is not needed. So the first question I'd always ask is, what's the problem we are trying to solve? Because typically if it's marketing dollars, generally prioritization is not as important. And I'll tell you why. If it's a good innovation or if it's a good plan, it needs to be able to self-fund itself, right? And that is important. If it is not good enough, then it is probably a bad idea to start with. And prioritization is not going to solve it because you're borrowing money from something that is working in order to fund this, right? Our global CFO and COO, John Moeller, has an interesting jingle. I'll try to recall and code it the right way. What he says is, if you have top line without bottom line, it's a waste of time. If you have bottom line without top line, it's a matter of time, right? So if you're trying to borrow from something that is working and investing in something that's not, it's a bad idea. Then it's not a question of prioritization. I would say be decisive and don't do that. Prioritization comes typically in technical communities and it comes to human beings because we tend to be limited in our capability and capacity. And at that point, then you prioritize based on two vectors typically, which is, do you have a winning proposition? If you do, then it's a function of how do you sequence it to make sure that you're able to address the biggest consumer needs, which have the biggest returns for the company as well. And then you go and address the other needs in a basis that offers you the ability to address it, but perhaps a year or two down the line. And that's where we do both long-term planning as well as short-term fiscal year planning. Those are the vectors that I've generally used in order to service the different priorities that are always going to compete with one another.
Thanks very much. Yeah.
Thank you, George. All right, let me continue along this vector. What P&G does, has always done, when we do this well, we've always succeeded, is have a portfolio of brands that provides daily use to consumers where performance drives brand choice. It is very important each one of these vectors is true. P&G went through a portfolio transformation a few years back when I think we had overextended our portfolio. And by doing that portfolio transformation, it has served us well. I'll give you an example that I personally led when I was in India on a similar portfolio transformation to make this point. So what you should expect is each one of this in the subsequent slides, I will be double clicking, right? So I'm going to give you an example of portfolio choices, but essentially we win when we have superiority, right? So that's the core vector that we have. We have 5 vectors of superiority that we live by. And what we've realized is it's not important because historically we've been very strong on product superiority, but we realize that's not sufficient, right? And that's why we call it now the 5 vectors of superiority. The first vector of superiority is product. I won't belabor this. I think the Guard example that I offered you in India is exactly to that point. When we offer superior propositions to consumers, in this case, a proposition that was not just meeting the consumer need, but better than the relative offering that they had, which would be double-edged razors, then consumers are willing to invest in these products in order to improve their lives, right? And these products, where we were offering at an outlay of 20 cents, and it's about the same that we are offering today, right? So that is what we call as irresistibly superior product, right? The second thing, and A.G. Lafley, one of our former CEOs said it well, is packaging. In the last 15, 20 years, we've realized the importance of packaging because this is how the consumers interact with us even before he or she uses the product, right? So it's incredibly important that packaging offers and speaks to them, and we call it the first moment of truth. It needs to say who we are or who the brand is, what does the brand do for you, and what specific unmet need of the consumer does it address. Let's take H&S, right? Head and Shoulders. It will normally say upfront, it's dandruff-free. So it's very clear that's the unmet consumer need that it's trying to solve, okay? Our communication is insight-driven, right? So going back to Guard razors to sort of close the loop, the insight there were nicks and cuts that the Indian male consumer was facing when they were shaving with double edge, and they didn't have the environment where they could rely on electricity or running water. So the communication which we developed on TV media addressed that need upfront. It showed somebody shaving in one hand with the ease of shaving, showing the comfort in shaving, showing that there are no nicks and cuts, set up in an environment that resonated with what we call is a semi-urban consumer, right? So it needs to be insight-driven and address and be able to resonate to that consumer. As far as our retail partners are concerned, we believe in having joint business plans that are win-win, because ultimately for us, we will win only if our customers and our partners win as well. And last but not the least is value. Let me just talk on the value point a little bit, because value often gets confused with being the cheapest offering. And especially it gets confused when you're talking to consumers in parts of the world that I serve here, which is many of the developing markets. That's actually not true. It needs to meet the outlay of these consumers because very often they can't afford higher level outlays. If you're selling Ariel laundry, she may want a sachet, which is a small single-use product, as opposed to buying big bags, right? Because they normally get weekly salaries, so it's easier for her to consume in sachets, right? But I met a consumer in Africa, and that really, she summarized it better than I can. What she said is, I can only afford Ariel. So I asked her, what do you mean? There are cheaper detergents available. Why don't you go for it? He said, it's not about being cheap. Those detergents don't consistently deliver the cleaning that's required, and I can't afford them to fail. I can buy only one laundry detergent, and I need to buy Ariel because I trust that Ariel will work. So, and that's why I'm willing to invest in Ariel. So it's important for her that in her laundry needs, we are able to deliver performance and stain removal, and we need to make sure we deliver it in that single use. So it needs to deliver on that efficacy, and it needs to be in a form that she can purchase, which is, as I said, a sachet form. So I just want to address that value, while often equated to price, it's a mistake to equate it to being cheap. Okay? Then there are a few things that we need to enable to make this strategy come alive. productivity needs to be a way of life. If you think in the regions that we operate, it's high inflation, it's typically devaluation trails inflation, and sometimes it's cumulative. It's important that we constantly look for efficiencies across all the P&L line items, and I don't think we'll ever see the end to productivity. Productivity is about doing more with less. Productivity is about being more focused, and it's about working through inefficiencies in the system. For instance, we are now figuring out it's not always needed to put fancy containers to ship products. Caseless containers can work. This is more sustainable for the environment and eliminates costs that the consumer should not be bearing, right? Then the next element is constructive disruption. Our current CEO, David Taylor, offers a great insight here. It's important that the change within P&G is faster than the change outside. Otherwise, just because we survived and thrived and won for 175 years does not give us the right to win for the next year. We need to constantly evolve. And I'll try and combine this with the focused and agile organization as I go in my subsequent slides. And one of the organizational transformations that P&G did. But ultimately, that is everything. All the strategy is effective only with an organization that's both equipped and enabled to execute it with excellence day in and day out. And I'll speak to it in subsequent slides with an example that P&G just went through. I'll pause here, Josh, to see whether there are other questions, or do you want me to move forward at this point? Okay, thank you. All right, I want to walk you through this example. So when I was in India, we've had growing top line. That top line was not necessarily translating to consistent bottom line performance. I remind you of the jingle that John said, top line without bottom line is a waste of time. And we had way too many good people in India to be wasting our time, right? So this is a portfolio transformation which we did. And again, quoting John, when he spoke this about the external stakeholders, he said, with this transformation, the top line means something because it's translating to meaningful bottom line. So what we did is we categorized the portfolio into three vectors. What does strategic means? What does a winning portfolio means? A winning portfolio simply means it's delivering on the 5 vectors of superiority, and we know we are able to make money, right? So that's the set of brands we want to stay invested. We want to continue to grow because we'll be able to continue to upgrade, provide innovation, continue to win externally, and return good money to our shareholders. Then there are the set of portfolio choices where we either did not have superiority or we did not see line of sight to financial attractiveness, or possibly both. Those we made the tough, but in some ways the easy decision to exit. Because if you don't have line of sight, the best thing you can do to the organization is just walk away from it, because when you belabor it, you're putting some precious resources behind it who could instead go against the strategic parts of the business to be able to grow top line, bottom line, and serve our consumers. Then there was a set of portfolio where we felt we could either address the portfolio needs or we could get to the financial attractiveness without losing our ability to win by making choices in terms of productivity. And then over a period of 2 years, we made sure that we actually fixed those businesses, so to speak, and they entered our strategic portfolio. This portfolio transformation delivered a significant bottom line accretion. And in 2 years, we started getting back to top line growth again, winning externally while delivering margins that were attractive to our stakeholders as well. So good portfolio transformation is one that focuses the organization on businesses where we have the right to win and where we have the ability to translate it to attractive financials. And when we do that, we always, and we work through the transition, that's painful because in a couple of years, you need to be able to sunset some of these products. But when you come out of it, it sets us up for success over the midterm by delivering top line that's bottom line accretive. Please, George.
So we have 3 questions. I will merge them, and they are.
Sure.
Do you sell Pantene at a lower price in India than in Japan? Second, how do you set up pricing from market to market? And third, what type of data and insights do you gather to do that?
Good. I'll go back to the vectors of superiority. And I'll go back to an earlier point that I made, and I'll try and, with those, address the 3 points. We have to win in every market that we play in, right? And to be able to win, one of the most important vectors of superiority is value. I spoke to it when we talked about the integrated set of choices. So it's important that the value Pantene offers to the Indian consumer is appropriate at an outlay she is willing to invest in. And the same needs to be true of the Japanese consumer. I have not found the ability, especially with this diverse consumers, for us to be able to offer the same brand, right? Let me take Philippines and Japan because it's an even more diverse example. In Philippines, as I said, the perfume is very important. So we actually test on top of the product a separate vector on perfume to make sure the perfume is a winning perfume, right? And I've yet to find a winning perfume that's same between Philippines and Japan, right? And so the product formulation is different, and accordingly, the pricing needs to be at both price points and in line with what's working for that consumer. Now, where we do what I call corridor analysis is to make sure, say, between Philippines and Thailand and Indonesia, we're operating within a reasonable corridor. And that's because there is free flow of products between these markets. Typically, in most of our products and most of our competitors, we are largely localized in our production. So all of us, for instance, ASEAN serve with manufacturing in ASEAN. So our products don't tend to flow across the vast geography of the world. It does happen, especially with Gillette and a few of the other products. And that's why in some of those we do global corridor pricing analysis. But in general, our pricing is relevant to the market we serve and is based on localized needs and needs to offer value to the consumer, which means this is the related competitive set and relative offerings she has in that market or he has in that market, depending on whether on what type of product that you are able to offer. Did I address your questions, George?
Yeah,
Was there any aspect of it that I left out?
No.
Okay.
Thanks very much.
Good. All right, running along. Now I'm going to shift gear to Philippines, and I'm going to walk you through some of these examples with Safeguard. One of my favorite brands. If you haven't used it, please use it. Safeguard is, I'm sorry, I'm from P&G. I have to do some marketing. It's just inherent in the DNA. But it's truthful marketing, so you can trust us. Safeguard is the biggest soap brand in the Philippines. Okay, it stands for long-lasting germ protection. It has always stood for that, and it is our intent to offer it for every life stage of our consumers. So you can see the portfolio that we offer in the Philippines. We have what is called our accessible portfolio, which is in single sachet bars. Then we have additional offerings, which are including in body wash. You can see the presentation is also different. They are in liquid form. And then we have what we call is our naturals line that offers an even higher end protection and additional needs that this consumer is looking for, right? So we call it internally the accessible, the germ protection, and the germ protection plus portfolio, right? So this is also offers us to address consumer needs at outlays that are relevant, but also offers delighters to the consumers that are relevant. And through those delighters, the consumers are typically willing to pay a premium for those delighters, which means it allows us to offer differentiated pricing and then returns accordingly, right? So it's a price ladder. It offers better revenue management. It meets consumer needs, and it translates to better returns for the company and the shareholders. This is what I call a perfect portfolio. Daily use products where performance drives brand choice, which is integrated in its thinking of product performance offering that generates better returns to the company while addressing consumer needs. Okay. The next vector is communication. This is a live example that's literally happening in the market as we speak. Okay. With COVID, and just for you to get some background on Philippines is still under some form of lockdown because we are still dealing with the realities of COVID in Philippines, right? So the Department of Health in Philippines was very keen to partner with P&G and use our credentialing to encourage the mindset of Filipinos to make sure that we have a safe and healthy nation, right? So our campaign is called Be the Solution, right? It's just wordplay. Be the Solution is obviously Be the Solution. But Be the Solution in Philippines, and I apologize if I haven't got my Tagalog right, if there are Filipinos calling in, please bear with me. But Be the Solution is also about, in Tagalog, which is the local Filipino language, it's about heroing the consumer. Bida means hero. So there's a hero that appears in all the commercials that offers the solution, and it encourages each consumer to be that hero, right? So we run campaigns where we teach consumers on how to wash the hand for 20 seconds, on the fact that they need to use Ariel in order to wash clothes, in order to use our products or any products for that matter that deliver on appropriate kitchen hygiene, to encourage consumers to still take a bath on a daily basis, even if they are not working outside, because at the end of the day, they have kids that are playing outside. When they come back home, it's important that we all stay at the appropriate levels of hygiene to make sure that we are safe and sound at this point in time. So this is the campaign that we are running. It meets the consumer need on health and hygiene. It addresses an important societal need, and it's something that we are partnering with the Department of Health. Again, it's an insight-driven communication that addresses a current need and is relevant to the consumers in the current environment. It goes back to the anchoring of superior insights, right? And that's why I wanted you to have a flavor of this. Go ahead, George.
We have a live question by one of our students, Liu Lu. You need to unmute yourself.
Hi, Liu.
Perfect.
Hi. Thank you, Professor. So my question is, during COVID, small business faced cash flow problem. So how did P&G help?
Excellent question, Liu. Thank you. One again that's very close to my heart. I'll give you an example in India, and then I'll hopefully it'll address it. At the end of the day, every business, the foundation, P&G believes, and every business should believe, is the people, right? So we have our distributor partners who have over 8,000 sellers in India, right? What's the biggest concern of a seller in a COVID environment? They're going to go to the store and potentially get infected, right? So we were the first company in India to offer COVID insurance. So we partnered with our distributors. We engaged with the insurance companies because we have the scale of P&G, and at an extremely inexpensive cost, we made sure each one of these sellers got COVID insurance to make sure that they could feel comfortable going to the store and they knew that daily wages would be protected. On top, we made sure that everybody was paid even if they didn't go to the store, because people are trying to work very hard, right? And it's important we recognize that, right? So those I offer you as examples of what I think we did, just as one example, but it also goes to the broader societal needs on COVID. So in this region, we actually quickly turned over 5 of our manufacturing units to produce masks, because many of the governments could not produce masks, surgical masks, and we told them we are going to offer these masks to them, and they can distribute it first amongst the health workers and in the broader communities. And we also offered donations and support of over $12 million to the different governments in this region to make sure they could support the PPE and other health requirements as they saw fit, right? So those are some examples on our role, which we call as Force for Good and Force for Growth, because we do take our responsibility and citizenship roles very seriously. Did I address your question, Liu?
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for asking. This is about guiding the consumers in the store, okay? If you've been to a FMCG store, the first thing you realize, and one thing that we constantly critique ourselves, is are we making it easier for the consumer, right? Because we can do all the conference room conversations. It needs to be relevant to the consumer when she goes to the store. So I use again Safeguard Philippines. We've organized the displays in a way that's based on life stages. Young babies as they grow up, and when she needs a different product at that point in time in her life stage. So we call it guiding moms based on life stage, so she can make selections accordingly, and we are able to help her. She doesn't have a whole lot of time to spend in that aisle. She's got better things to do. So we need to make it very easy for her and speak to her when she comes to that store. Productivity. I wanted to use this example because many times productivity is understood with a negative connotation. I actually think it's a positive connotation, because if you're not productive, if you're not offering consumers best value, we are actually wasting our time internally as well. And more often than not, we're not doing what's right for the environment. So this is one of my favorite examples. So in Philippines, we had plastic over wraps. We moved it to recyclable paper bowls, right? Significant savings for the environment, and significant savings for the consumer, and significant savings for the company as well, right? This is the kind of productivity that we should all encourage, and this is the kind of productivity that I like as well, because it's sustainable in the true sense of the word. Okay, this is the last slide I had, and then I'll leave the floor open for more questions. I think we have, I believe, a bit more time to address any more questions that we have. It's important that we are constantly disrupting ourselves, and this was one of the breakthrough organization changes we did. So this, as I told you in my slide on the integrated strategy, offers you the context of how constructive disruption can work, and I've layered it with also the organization point, okay? So what we did was we eliminated the matrix. So we had our top focus markets, take Japan, North America. We take those markets and we said we are going to ladder it to our sector business units. So our sector business units are laddered up here. So they are our paper sector, our beauty sector, our family sector. So each one of them has a sector CEO. They run the business. And for the top markets of P&G, they report as an end-to-end organization directly into the sectors. So the sectors have the ability to work with the markets. There is no go-between. They are responsible for the results. They are responsible for operationalization of the strategy. And then we take the vast majority of the other markets, like the enterprise market, where agility is the key, where we do have category experts, but those category experts roll up into the enterprise leader. In this case, it will be Suran, who is the president of Asia Pacific, Middle East, and Africa, and the finance leaders will report into me, right? That means we have the single point accountability and the agility to make decisions to serve the consumers in this region, and we can take the research and the technical aspects from the sectors who support us to give what we need, but they don't need to focus on the day-to-day. That's our responsibility to deliver on their behalf, right? And this allows us to work to the end-to-end integration in the big markets, where they should be spending most of their time, whereas in the enterprise market, it gets to agility because we don't need to go up and down to the headquarters. We can run this region from here. And then we have important corporate resources and global business service that supports us. For instance, treasury. I don't need to have every one of my country CFOs worry about it. I work with the treasury team, and the treasury team is able to offer the best financing costs for the market. Similarly, the accounting work happens and is serviced across all these markets, which frees up considerable amount of time for the people sitting in the market to focus on serving the consumers and delivering returns to the shareholders, right? So this disruption is one of the reasons why I think P&G's growth has accelerated profitably in the recent past, right? And it's important we are constantly disrupting ourselves. With that, I'll turn it over back to you, George. If you have more questions, I'll be very happy to take them.
Yeah, we have several, but maybe how about this? There's one question about this one. Michael has another question, and then we go to the other questions that we have. Sure. Let me ask this one very quickly, and then maybe Michael can go with his question. So this student is asking for a bit of coaching, and she preferred that we don't share her name. And she says, my job is in corporate marketing to ensure markets follow guidelines. I want markets to feel that I am on their side, but it's hard. Any tips on how to do that?
Sure. It's everyday life for all of us, right? Because depending on where you sit, you'll need to engage the person on the other side. So our CEO, David Taylor, has a very nice way of framing it. He says his job is to service Suran and me, and our job is to service the markets. That flips the mindset, right? That's important. Second thing is, let's take one capability that I'm rolling out to the region at this point in time. Disproportionate amount of the time investment that I've done for that is to first walk the lead team through what are the benefits of it. So first you have the buy-in of each of the category and the country leader in the market. But even before we did that, we piloted it in a couple of markets and tell them, how can this work for you? What are the biggest issues you're facing? And then we worked with them intensely to make sure those issues were getting addressed. And then we went to the lead team with those examples. We excited the lead team, and they came back and said, we want it in our market. And that's how you want it. You want to showcase a couple of examples where it's successful, and then you want to get the buy-in of the lead team that they want it. So when you go to the market, they are personally advocating for it along with you, as opposed to trying to debate the utility of it. And if you're going to debate the utility of it, then don't try to force it. Then let it come to the market when they think it best serves that need, right? And that is something that you can pace out, because every market will probably take it at a pace at which they can best digest, right? So in this capability, we are not going to go all out in 30 days to every market. Japan said they have some unique considerations. So we said we're going to come back to you 6 months later, work with you, and we'll do it at a pace at which you're ready to absorb it, right? Philippines wanted to go first, so we went first with them, and then we went to the Middle East market, so on and so forth. So that's what I would encourage. Learn with the markets, showcase the results through the markets, have them speak on your behalf to the lead team. Then once there is buy-in, you will see that it gets rolled out, and then work again with every market to address that unique needs. That way, while it will take time, you will find that the results are better and it's more sustainable.
Thanks. Michael, would you like to go ahead with your question?
Sure. Karthik, many thanks. Really inspiring and, insightful sharing, which is tremendous. I don't know if you can see me. Hopefully you can hear me. But my question is, we probably have over 1,400 marketers or so at the school, young emerging professionals in marketing and PR. And, in general, the industry has got a bit of a bad rap for having lost track, maybe getting too distracted by digital marketing, or, losing track of sort of growth and things like that. And we like to think we're putting our students back on track. But what would you say, as a very successful leader in the finance function, is the most important thing that young emerging professionals in marketing should know and understand about the finance function and the priorities of financial leaders in a corporation, or a corporation like P&G?
That's a fantastic question, Michael. Thanks so much for asking. The first one, if I may venture, I think irrespective of the function, I would say if you're in marketing, I would stay with the problem that you're trying to solve as long as possible. More often than not, when we realize our marketing is not working, we are not stayed with the consumer problem long enough. We get too distracted by the jazzy digital tool as opposed to the problem we are trying to solve. And once we're defining the problem, then the tool becomes an enabler to solve that problem, right? In terms of what do we need to know about the finance function, or what are the dynamics, the first thing that I always tell anybody who's taking on is, please understand that at the end of the day, the metrics are going to be the same. A successful business, I say, does three things very well. It's able to grow in our field, what I call as a category, because if we're growing the hair care category, it will always translate to better market share. It is consistently able to grow top line, and it will consistently translate to bottom line. A successful business only operates on these three vectors. It doesn't matter whether you're a financial leader, or it doesn't matter whether you're a marketing leader. Too often, young marketeers sometimes try to make the compromise between, okay, if I need to win externally, I need to invest for 4-5 years, and so I might not be able to make money. Or if I need to make money, I need to be able to compromise in the short term on top and bottom line. On top line and category growth and share. I have never found that to work. Right? It's obvious that in some cases you will need to invest for a period of time. That's fine. That's an exception. But in general, if a business doesn't operate on these three vectors, it's not good for the financials, it's not good for a marketer, it's not good for the consumer, and it's unlikely to be good for the shareholder. So I would say translate all the business deliverables into these three vectors. And if those three vectors are being delivered, I think we'll be a very successful marketer. And I wish everybody well. Did I answer your question, Michael?
Excellent. Yeah, thank you. Very, very constructive. Thank you.
So we have several questions going on, and then we can take as many as you're able to. But first, I would like to thank my colleague Natalie Mayer, who is helping. She's our actual host today, and Ria, who's also managing the Q&A. Well, we thank you virtually, Natalie, since we cannot see your face. But the students did a very short video to thank you, and maybe we could play this just a few seconds. Natalie, I don't know if you're able to do it. Oh, there you, perfect.
Thank you for sharing your experience as a CFO and providing insight on how to create better strategic direction for a company. 谢谢.
I appreciate you spending time with us, giving us such a powerful presentation, and sharing your insight and knowledge in the finance industry. 谢谢.
We appreciate you sharing your knowledge and perspective on management, as well as executing strategies at the global level.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge and your meaningful experience in business with us.
Thank you for giving us advice on how to grow and succeed in business. Muchas gracias.
Thank you so much, Shishini. Muchas gracias.
Yeah. On behalf of everyone, thank you so much. How much more time do we have? How many more questions I can share from them? They will be asking the questions live.
George, I can go for another 10-15 minutes. I have no problem. And if the students are fine, I'm fine.
Great, excellent. So this question is coming from Katie. Katie, go right ahead.
Hi, Karthik. This is Katie. So my question is,
Hi, Katie.
As a CFO, what is the most important thing to lead the company into the right direction financially?
There are three things, Katie, that as a CFO that I need to always keep in mind. First one is it's my responsibility to provide the right strategic direction to the company and to make sure that it's getting operationalized appropriately. That's job number one. Job number two is to make sure that we have the organization to be able to support those choices and to be able to develop the next generation of leaders. At P&G, we're a promote from within company. So if you do not invest time in grooming the next generation of leaders, then I won't have a replacement down the road, and that's not a good outcome. And the third one is stewardship, is to make sure that we're doing things the right way. It's embedded in everything that we do, but as a function, finance, we take the added responsibility as a stewardship function to make sure that the accounting processes, the revenue recognition, and the way we act and do is not only done the right way, it's also perceived to be done the right way. So we're going to boil down to three unique things that I'm responsible for. I'd categorize them as those. Did I address your question?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
The next question is from Xiaoning Pan. Xiaoning. Yeah.
Hi, this is Xiaoning. First, thanks.
Hi, Xiaoning.
And my question is, based on the financial report from P&G, we see the sales grow from 68 to 71 billion. So what was the impact of the epidemic on it? Thank you.
Fantastic question, Xiaoning. I hope I can give you an answer because it's not going to be straightforward. The impact of the pandemic, let's say a few things. It's clear based on everything that we've understood, there is a significant heightened need for health and hygiene products, right? And that is seen come across in our top line results. We have delivered now our best top line results. We're delivering about our best top line results even pre-COVID, and that's only got further accelerated with COVID, right? We believe the heightened concerns on health and hygiene are here to stay. I beg your pardon. That's because normally when consumer habits change, they don't tend to flip out immediately. They tend to stay with the consumers for a very long period of time. So on the midterm, I can tell you, P&G is extremely well positioned to succeed because, as I said, we offer daily use products where performance drives brand choice. And with the concerns on health and hygiene being at a heightened level, our products are even more relevant today than they have ever been, right? So I'm confident of the midterm growth of this company today more than I've ever been. Having said that, it's impossible to predict the short term, right? Because in the developed markets of the world, there's been significant amount of purchases that have been happening. And some of that we know is pantry loading. We also know that discount levels in some of our products have gone down simply because there is not enough supply availability. So consumers as well as customers are obviously able to place it without necessarily offering the same levels of discount. Whereas in much of the region that I operate in, because of the fact that it's been locked down, there were periods where we could not manufacture, so we had to scramble to manufacture and make sure our products are available. And even today, as I said, there are different parts of this region which is under lockdown, which means the top line is being more directly impacted. So long-winded way of saying it's impossible for me to predict what turn COVID is going to take in the short term, but I can give you with reasonable confidence that I think we are going to be well placed to succeed over the midterm, simply because of the fact that we are well positioned to address the health and hygiene needs of the consumers. I know it's not a perfect answer, but I don't think one exists at this point in time.
That's very true. The next three questions are more personal, and the first one is from Karina.
Hi. Thank you for sharing us. I have 2 questions. So the first is, why did you choose to work at P&G? And second is, what factors drove your decisions to work at P&G?
Got it. Yeah. Sure. Sort of the same in one way or the other. Look, when 20 years back, I was a graduate student. I just completed and I'd come to campus and I looked at different brochures that I'd come to, and I can articulate it better in words now, but the feeling is the same that I got at that point in time, right? That brochure seemed to be all about people and how they would groom people and how it will be good for the people. And that was so different from everything else that others were saying, which was all about how great they were. And that fact that they were so interested in developing me and offering me the opportunity to work with the best people appealed to me then, appeals to me now, right? That was the single biggest factor. My father is somebody who keeps himself up to date with everything. I told him I'm considering P&G, and he was very happy. And when I joined P&G, and I still remember today, he came and gave me a hug. He's not very prone to expressing his emotions, right? And that stayed with me. I said, okay, this is probably a good decision I've made. And it's probably 20 years later, I can tell you it's one of the better life decisions that I've made. And that's why I'm still here.
That's a real good answer. The next one is from Tianfeng. So.
Hi, Tianfeng.
Hi, this is Tianfeng. First, thank you for sharing with us. And I'm curious, what do you enjoy most about your work?
Okay. 2 things, really. My brother once told me, if you join a company, the first 5 to 6 years, you will learn faster and contribute slower. After that, you will need to contribute more and your learning curve will reduce. I said, okay, let's get to it when I get to it. 20 years later, I can tell you the learning curve hasn't stopped at P&G, right? That's what motivates me to come to work every day. I feel like I'm going to discover something new. I feel I'm going to explore something new. And that's because the company constantly challenges and expands your horizon. That's, to me, the most exciting part. The second one, I go back to it. I might sound like a broken record, but it's true, is the people that I work with, right? It's a joy and a pleasure. They happen to be some of my closest friends as well. And they're also people that I would look up to any point in time, not just at work, even outside, as upright, outstanding people, right? And that's such a fantastic opportunity to come with some of the best minds and work. It is factually true. It's more difficult to get into P&G than some of the best universities. And that just stands to the testimony of the quality of people that we have. George being part of this journey as well. So I welcome your comments as well, George.
Yeah, I remember that test that we had to take, right? That, very few people, I forgot what it was called, but at least back then. So
the problem-solving test.
Yeah. So the last question from the group, and then we'll try to take one, from
sure.
Ria's group, and to be respectful. This question is from Leila.
Hola, how are you? My question.
Hi, Leila. Hola.
My question is, like the professor said, a little more personal. Was it difficult for you and your family to move to so many countries?
Okay. At this point, I would say the level of excitement is a bit more than the level of difficulty. Is it difficult? Yes. And I'm fortunate and blessed to have a spouse who still sees it as an adventure. some days she may stop seeing it that way, and then I might have to make different choices. But at this point, I'm very thankful for the fact that she sees and wants to explore different cultures, and she feels it's also a personal growth opportunity for her, right? And the kids still enjoy it. Sometimes my 5-year-old gets confused. She thinks on the weekend, can I go back to my Dubai school? And I have to sort of explain to her, it doesn't quite work that way. It takes longer than a 2-hour bus ride or a 1-hour bus ride to get to the school in Dubai. But I think the journey's been more of an adventure and less of a chore. And at some point, I recognize that might flip, and we'll try and stay put in one location then. But at this point, Leila, I feel more blessed to have had this experience than anything else. And I think I would speak for my family that they feel the same way.
Gracias. So, Ria, maybe we can take one last question from your group.
Yes, I'll ask this question from Shengen Kai. Are most P&G brands acquired or created? Is P&G's current strategy more towards acquisition or creating new brands?
Hey, Ria, and thanks for the question as well. It's both actually, and sometimes we don't even know that the brand's been acquired, right? When we make some big acquisitions, we get small brands, and we realize then they have been big organic brands for us. Pantene is an example. Most people in the company wouldn't even recognize that as a brand that we acquired. It was very small when we brought something else and it came along, and today it's a huge brand for us, right? Fundamentally, our bias is always to make sure that we are able to develop it, but we also recognize that sometimes we'll be able to create better value by acquiring, because it allows us to enter into spaces that we will be able to do better through an acquisition. Gillette is a great example of it. P&G has always been a company that's focused on serving the women consumer. And with Gillette, we could get into a space of being able to solve the problems of the men as well. And it would have taken a lot of time for P&G to develop that capability. And what it did is allowed us to get that sooner rather than later. And we believed with the go-to-market and the marketing capabilities that P&G had when we could combine with Gillette, it would allow us to meaningfully accelerate the growth of the brand and the business as well. And it's panned out extremely well for us. And along with Gillette, we also then got Oral-B, which has now become a flagship brand for us, for instance, in most of the markets that I serve, which is in Asia, Pacific, Middle East, and Africa. So I'd say there is no perfect answer as which way, but we'd start by making the brands that we have the biggest, and we'd look to acquire where it makes sense. And typically it needs to make sense, not just in one market, but more on a global scale, because otherwise it's difficult for us to sustain the innovation platform, especially the back-end R&D technology and the like that goes with it, right? Again, no perfect answer, but it's a combination of these factors that drive our decision.
Great. So I will ask my colleagues if they could unmute themselves. And look, I was delighted. I know that we have taken a lot more time than we should have. But, having someone like you from finance, he's from finance and he drives the strategy and the marketing. So you're helping me, let the students see that finance can be a lot of fun too. So on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for joining us. And, they'll get a recording. You can see them at least that they'll get a recording and they'll be able to benefit from this session. So thank you very much.
Judge, thank you so much. And I want to thank the students as well. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for taking time in your busy schedules as well. Have a wonderful marketing career ahead. Ciao.
All righty. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.